Travis, welcome to the Dr. Tom Show. It's such a pleasure to have you on. I've wanted you to come on for quite a while, but I know how busy you are, and everyone's just listened to your intro and your bio, which is extraordinary. And with achieving so much, you've obviously got such a rich and deep mind that we can share from today. But with all of that going on and your history, how did you fall into chiropractic? Or how did chiropractic come about within the mix of that?
Like, how did I be just introduced to chiropractic and become a chiropractor?
Yeah. What was your journey into chiropractic?
Well, I was after studying nuclear engineering in the military, I went back, worked for the family business as an engineer, and I really loved the intellectual side of that. I loved math, physics, and that kind of stuff. But man, was it depressing just to work in front of a computer all the time. So I was always in the back in the fabrication shop trying to help those guys. And one day I was lifting like this 8-inch pipe valve that probably weighs more than my car, and blew out my low back. And luckily, it was actually a British guy, that a fellow engineer. He's like, "You're going to the chiropractor, I'm taking you." And reluctantly I went. He pretty much dragged me because I was in so much pain. It hurt to breathe. And luckily we just found one in the phone book. And luckily this one, she's like 1 year out of school from Palmer, and went there. I was a very frustrating client because as a philosophy major, I have a lot of questions. And I also studied biology. So I was very frustrated. I want to understand all this. And it got to the point, after 2 months of care, which of course it helped with my low back and my vision. I got rid of my glasses as well. But all these things were changing, and I wanted to know why. She explained it all, and that it just hit perfectly. So the combination of all my education prior to that, engineering, degree in philosophy, biology, chiropractic is all of that. Philosophy, very mechanical as well, but it also there's just so much. And then biology, the study of life. So chiropractic was like the amalgam of all my previous studies, right? And then, long story short, after 2 months of care, I basically quit my job and enrolled at Palmer myself. And then 4 months after my first adjustment was my first day of class. And since then, it's been, I never would have thought that I'd be doing all the stuff I'm doing now, but I'm glad I'm doing it. And but that slowly developed too, getting into all this stuff.
Well, I think it has developed over time, because you really have, in the time that I've known you, done so much and moved forward with so much. And you probably hit a home run there, didn't you, really, with your science, art, and philosophy in terms of landing in chiropractic. And with such an engineering background, but obviously I think you've got a thirst for knowledge, which is your philosophy. Why has philosophy come out as the thing that really fascinates you, interests you? It's what you're, along from, earning the practices and really helping people in the Netherlands and serving on the boards. Alongside that, philosophy is the thing that, you hang your coattails on. Tell me, how do you get into that, or why are you so passionate about driving that forwards?
For me, it's because, philosophy is something I can rely on. I do like science too. Science is great. After all, engineering, I love math and science. I love that concrete stuff. However, science, it's just defined as a body of knowledge. And knowledge, that can be correct or incorrect. And you're always adding to it. That's why science, or quite literally a body of knowledge, it comes from the Latin "sciare," to know. That's where we get the word science. It just means knowledge. And your knowledge should be always growing or adding or improving or sharpening. So as we discover new things, you may have to correct that body of knowledge or make changes to it. However, logic and reasoning, those don't change. That's a stable systematic process. It's very repeatable, stable, reliable. And that's the key to philosophy, logic. Logic is to philosophy what math is to science, right? The applied sciences, right? Well, how do you apply the sciences? With mathematics. I don't know any scientist, chemist, biologist, anything that doesn't know how addition and subtraction work. That would be crazy, right? So it's the same with philosophy. There's a lot of people that claim to be philosophers or work with philosophy or practice philosophy, but yet they don't really know like the 5 operators of logic. And that would be just like someone applying science without knowing multiplication, division, addition, subtraction.
Well, I think it's the case like with philosophy, is especially with the schooling system, that we've grown up as philosophy of just being the learning the teachings of philosophers that existed before, and not actually getting into doing it for ourselves.
Exactly. I think you hit that on the head. It's and that's not that's a transfer of knowledge. That's not actually learning, right? If I always give this example, like the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Most people know this, right? And I could tell it to you, and now you know it, but you don't understand why is it true, because you didn't deduce it for yourself, like Pythagoras did. And that is what we're missing in schools. We're just taught, and it happens, a lot of it may be true, but you become accustomed or acclimated to simply believing, and you're never, maybe lip service is paid to this, but school has really eliminated deductive and inductive reasoning. And it's exactly what you said. You're just given, oh, the philosophers, this is what Aristotle said, and this is what Plato says. Okay, but can you validate that yourself through either syllogisms or symbolic logic? But are you applying deductive and inductive reasoning and in those like operators, just like you would in math? Are you applying conjunction, disjunction, conditional, biconditional statements to draw your conclusions validly? And we don't get that in school. It's just what you said. We just get
and I see that changing a lot, and I see it changing in school, and I see it changing in the profession actually. Well, certainly over here in the UK, having been involved with the system over here, you have secondary education, which is obviously your schooling, as a teenager. Then you're meant to move into tertiary, which is meant to be thinking for yourself at university level. And I really think the only part of that was thinking for yourself was your thesis. But now they're removing the thesis for tests.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't involve any deductive or inductive sort of reasoning with that at all.
No.
And then you come into the profession and you go into CPD, which we're meant to be doing all the time, continuous professional development.
Yeah.
And now they're turning around and telling us what we should be doing for CPD, which again removes our own logic of coming to our own understanding of that. And is that something that you see in the Netherlands, or is that you see nationally, internationally, or is it just here?
I think that's global. That like what you said about the thesis, even wasn't that long ago they used to do thesis, but what good is writing a thesis if like there's something you really want to explore and really think about? Well, you have to get that approved from a professor who has to get approval from his higher ups and it's a problem at the top, and it filters down, everyone trying to maintain their position all the way down to the student who's just simply trying to pass. So you really don't have the freedom to pursue and write the thesis of what you want. It's like this. They say, you're free to ask any questions or pursue anything, but here's a list of approved questions. Here's a list of approved theses you can write about. Okay, great. Now I'm asking these approved questions. Then they say, well, so I check a few sources. Then they tell you what sources are approved sources. So there really is no freedom of thought. Academia is almost at every level, from primary school all the way to graduate school, is doing a good job of very subtly eliminating free thought by giving the impression that we're doing more, we're actually just doing less thinking.
That's a bit of a dangerous game to play, isn't it, I suppose?
Of course.
What's the end state of that?
Well, I think if we're talking strictly chiropractic, and then you could blow this out into the wider picture too, because everything that happens in chiropractic happens on a macro scale as well. So if you want to know what's going on in the world as a chiropractor, look at what's going on in the profession. You see how there's this division and there's this problem and that problem. All the tactics and strategies and pitfalls and threats, they're identical. And how I see it is it begins by redefining terms. So that's the beginning. If you've ever heard me talk about the trivium, it always starts with knowledge, right? What do I know, right? Is this correct or incorrect? And define my terms. So in chiropractic, we already see, like, if I were to look up chiropractic on Wikipedia, that's certainly not the definition of chiropractic I know. The way the schools are defining it is not what I know. Defining subluxation has changed, or saying that it just doesn't exist. And then you see that in the world at large as well. Look at what happened in November last year. The definition of herd immunity changed. Look at what happened this past January. The definition of what a vaccination is has changed. And these are changing not because to accommodate new knowledge or new understanding, but to accommodate corporate interests, or, yeah, and I don't want to get like that's a conspiracy or stuff, but these are redefined to support people that sponsor something, like their interests. And so when you begin redefining terms, it's near impossible. Say you're like Tom, you're one of the most critical thinkers I know, flawless processing of knowledge to a conclusion. But it doesn't matter how good you think or how good your processor is if I'm redefining the terms that you use. Just like on a computer, if I hit the key E, but W comes up, that is a problem. If I reassign what the labels are, then it's very difficult to process knowledge. And by the redefinition of terms in our profession, outside of our profession, what you're going to see is, that the conclusions drawn may be through perfect reasoning, but by the manipulation of inputs, I can manipulate the output. Another thing they do too, that's just at the knowledge level. And like what we were talking earlier before we got on the call, it's also very easy to, how do I say, like down-regulate the processing, that thinking, by eliciting emotions, right? If I can get you emotionally engaged, and that could be either way, like some compliments about your lovely glasses and you're really healthy and shining out, your hair looks great, but you're feeling kind of really good. I'm building rapport, and it's easier to sell you something if I was a nefarious individual, right? Because you're in an emotional, suggestive state. Although if I were to say some very choice, cruel things to you, you can get very defensive. So by eliciting certain emotions, I've down-regulated your ability to think clearly, and I can get the reactions I want and get the conclusions I want.
And you see that all the time with scarcity, I suppose, is the main thing, isn't it? Like scarcity is the biggest thing. And I think the way around it, and it seems impossible to move around it because it is so global and so above where we might see ourselves as a little individual. But like you say, it's applying logic to your own life. I just thought, I don't know if you remember the song. It was called The Class of 99. And the guy departs advice, and he said, "This advice has no basis more reliable than my own meandering experience," which essentially is where we should be getting a lot of stuff if we can think for ourselves, or if we know that we're thinking for ourselves. And you just said there that, being in fear or being in, admiration or love can change our logic. If I'm saying the terms right, what can people do practically to take the stimulus that's coming at them and make their own decisions or understandings without getting caught up in hysteria or just following along with the herd?
Yeah, oh man, that's a great question. The first thing I would recommend is to understand why it's of so much value. You first asked me, like, why is philosophy so important? Well, that's because, and I think you probably agree with me, nothing is more important than the quality of your mind, right? Because that's where all of your decisions come from. So if someone's eliciting emotions from you, they're really in control of your mind. That means they're in control of your life. If I control the quality of your emotions and the state of your being, I really have quite a bit of influence on the outcomes, right? So to seize the quality of mind and what you can do about that, certainly it's no easy task, and there's not like this secret 5-step process or whatever, but it's first to begin, acknowledge something. And that is, there's a problem, and you cannot solve or fix or repair a problem without an understanding of what you're working on. Like if I wanted to fix the engine on my car, how am I going to do that with no understanding of how engines work? That would be stupid. I would open that thing and just look blankly at the motor or the engine. So first I would recommend is that people get acquainted with the components of the mind and how it works. Like, I mean, most of us chiropractors, we know all the components of the body, how they work together, the functions they serve. It's not difficult, but first get acquainted with some of the main components of your mind and how those work. Like the ego, we were talking earlier, which is simply a defense mechanism. It's not a bad thing. Memory, emotions, all very important. Critical thinking, which is probably what we'll be talking mostly about. Know what they are, that they have distinct purposes. And once you understand how all that works, then you can set forth on how to fix it. And once you get that, then I would recommend first overcoming like probably the first obstacle or hurdle. And that is what we also talk about frequently, or I talk about all the time, is the discernment between thought and emotion. They're not the same. And that is I think the world is in like this mass confusion right now, that just because you have, strong feelings or a strong conviction, that's actually that you're participating in thought. But an emotion is just a reactive, it's a reaction to the environment. And it serves you very well. You should be reacting to your environment. Like the example I gave you, if some wild animal comes into the room right now, I should feel fear. It's an automatic reaction. It's not a process. I'm not thinking about it. I trust that the body reacts in the appropriate way automatically. And there's going to be some influence too from my past experiences. So my past experiences plus the current circumstances is going to automatically generate an emotional reaction, probably fear if it's a vicious wild animal. But it'd be very different if my loving mother walked in the room, then I'd have this feeling of being enamored. So emotions serve me really well, but it is not a process of thought. Thought creates a response. Emotions create a reaction. And I think the biggest thing keeping people from thinking for themselves, that biggest barrier, is the illusion that their strong emotions is actually thought. And I'm not being dismissive of emotions. It's better to know what their actual purpose in your life is. It'd be like driving your car. If you didn't have emotions, it'd be like driving your car with no speedometer, no engine temperature gauge, none of this. You're just blindly, you need those automatic reactions to the environment to best handle that vehicle. I don't know if that explains it, but that's what I would recommend. That's the first obstacle.
That makes a lot of sense. And as I'm thinking both in chiropractic and outside of chiropractic. Inside of chiropractic, you take newer chiropractors who've not been doing it for a while, and then they make a lot of judgment on how they work with their patients or their clients on emotion. They're scared of oh, I'm scared to do the wrong thing, or they get pumped up like I'm the best.
Yeah.
And like we said earlier, they haven't got that meandering experience necessarily yet, which again comes with time. And then I think about the current situation. I think about distancing that's happening. And it's so funny to see the changes in people's perception of distancing, whether they know, like, or trust the person that they're near compared to if they don't. So, the whole concept and thought of biology and virology will go out the window if they know and trust the person in front of them. They'll just pull that thing off their face and go right next to them. Whereas if they don't like the look of somebody else, they'll walk around and keep their distance. And it's just, there's no logic going on there at all. It's all based on emotion.
Purely.
So I completely agree with what you're saying, and I can see it happening, and emotion is a big blocker.
Yeah, we're in a heightened state of very heightened state of fear. This is a very interesting time right now. Very interesting.
How does one get through the fear, do you think? What do you think is a practical way of, if someone, and quite rightly or wrongly, or more, should I say, quite appropriately for where people are at the moment, they are caught in fear.
Yeah.
They are caught in fear. Like, I've been working with some people who run practices, and the practices are suffering. Then they're getting caught in the fear and moving away from the logic.
Yeah.
Like, if someone is caught in fear, what's something that is there anything that they can do just to identify between what is an emotional response and what is a thought response?
What I would do, let me say, like, I'm overcome with fear sometimes. I mean, that happens. These are, it's an automatic reaction. Like, to avoid fear or think that fear is bad is a little, I don't think that's a helpful thought either, right? I mean, fear is what keeps, like, the antelope alive when it sees a lion, right? It's an indication to run. Irrational fear, however, or chronic irrational fear, that can cause a lot of problems. So it's tough to discern the difference, but I would say with all the fear that's going on, and what you can do is don't condemn it, don't run from it, just try and face it. And that's what I've had to do. You get, and that you become stronger from it. But recently, I was asked by someone very close to me, what do you think's happening? Travis, what do you think the future is coming? I said, I really don't know, but I will continue. Like, I have a high purpose and a high mission and vision in my life. And that's what I'm working towards. I think if people have a very high vision for their life, or a high purpose, that it's easier to overcome fear, because you know what why you have to face it. But if, like, your biggest purpose in life is just to pay rent this week, and I understand for some people that's really a reality, then it's easier to be overcome with fear or stuck in the fear. But what you don't want to do is fall into the trap of futility, right? Everything's so grim right now. There's nothing we can do. That is not the right attitude, right? If we got ourselves into this mess, we can get ourselves out. And then when you see all the propaganda that continually feeds us fear, you think, well, that propaganda is necessary, because if it wasn't there, we'd all be back to normal, right? And then once you get this one thing, it's like, kind of like, I use a poker example. Whether the world just turns into the worst nightmare you can think of, right? Like, we're all in indoctrination, re-education camps, or something, the worst, like, tyrannical scenario you can think of. And that would be done to give all sorts of shadowy figures control. Well, they can get all that same economic and political control simply by you being afraid that the future will be that. Right? I noticed in myself that, like, I've been more hesitant to make certain financial and economic decisions or investments, thinking like, oh, it's all so grim, and then this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And so they've already won in that case when I'm thinking like that, right? So you think it's like poker. You don't have to be holding 4 aces, but if I simply believe you do, you've won. And that's what we're letting the fear, whether it's really bad, it doesn't have to be really. All it has to do is appear bad, and they've won. So if we want to win, then we have to see past that, have a high purpose, and know that just play the bluff. If your purpose is big, nothing's going to stop you. Right? Big purpose means big push.
I agree. And it's like you said earlier, nothing's more important than the mind. And I think the fear is losing the material, and the purpose gets us into the mind. And it's not just like, some people will hear purpose and they'll see it as a G up, and then they'll fall back into that trap of emotion again, which will push them to do something for a very short period of time and then right back. But like you said, like, purpose is, it takes effort, and it takes relentless work and an understanding. Like you gave the example before the show, we talked about going to the gym. Like, if you want to create a result in the gym, it's relentless pursuit of that, putting in the work and knowing what you're trying to achieve. So I suppose people can put some work into knowing what they're trying to achieve to get to that purpose.
Yeah, I think we would say, like, the current environment, like cultural environment, has taught us that things have just come easy. That there's always a shortcut. There's plenty of gurus to sell us that stuff too. Just download my free PDF and it's going to answer all your problems. Or the next new cool meditation, or gratitude journal. And not that those things don't have value, they really do in isolation or in combination with each other. But thinking that it's a short-term thing, that is just what I meant by going to the gym. I don't go to the gym and think, wow, I went today, never have to go ever again. All my, like, I'm the perfect physical specimen because I went to the gym one time.
This is
Or
true,
once a
Travis.
year. No, it's really, I wish. Just as it is for the body, so it is for the mind. It is a rigorous pursuit. But no one's going to follow through with that rigorous pursuit unless they see the value, right? And that is not, we're not presented with that enough, in my opinion. Like, people aren't clear on why a high quality mind is so important to them, right? Because it's not something, I always say this, you can't show off your mind in the mirror, but like white shiny teeth that you just had the dentist freshen up and color for you, your makeup, your big biceps, all that stuff in the mirror is what we're so focused on, like what people can see. However, like, the real value is your mind, I mean, when I buy a computer, like, look at the prices of computer. They don't go up based on like the hard drive and the memory. It's the processor. As the processors improved over the years, that is what increased the price. That is the value of a computer. And that is the value of us. Like, our value is in our ability to process, to make quality decisions, which result in quality action, and then the quality life, in my opinion.
Well, it's true. It's funny that as human beings, as societies, we've come so far away with that, because the quality of the processor of a human being comes through that experience, comes through that, using that logic over years. And if you look at our, the way our ancestors would have done it, or you look to North Africa or South American tribes, their elders are the processors with the most value, of which they then download and learn from and repeat. Whereas we, like you say, get the 7 steps or take the shortcut and just keep spinning in these circles of short-term gratification.
Yeah, we've been quite, now, nothing against that. We've been quite spoiled, but one of these, it's popular in chiropractic. We say it all the time, the shoulders of giants, right?
Mm.
And it's similar to what you're saying about these, like the older cultures, like the older person in the tribe. Not only do they have an incredible processor, but they're also an incredible wealth of information. Like, they're very strong in the first 2 liberal arts, a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding of that knowledge. They've really processed it. And it's that, what you were saying about the meandering experience. Those older people, they've really put it together, right? But now it's hard to look at like some of our elders who have been ultimately the result of a horrible education system, or let's say schooling system, that's more appropriate, and that are just married to the radio and television and what the mainstream media says. But it's understandable too. They grew up in an age where, like, I'm thinking of some of like my grandparents who recently all passed away now, but there's a very good reason that they believed everything they saw on TV. Because in their time, at the advent of like radio and stuff like this, it was a big deal, and journalists had integrity, and it wasn't yet commercialized. So it was a very trustworthy source. And if you grow up trusting this source, then as it evolves, as it becomes sold out or whatever, you're not aware of that. You're just still listening to it. They've been accustomed or domesticated to, this is a trustworthy source. And they never really had to do that intellectual rigor we were talking about.
It was like you said, the definition changed, didn't it?
Yeah, in a way. And so now where in those older times when you could look to the elders for sage advice, right? Their wisdom is the expression of their incredible, vast, correct knowledge. Hopefully it's correct. And their understanding of that knowledge. That's what wisdom is. Their expression of the knowledge and understanding they've acquired. That was a real value back then. Nowadays, our current elders are missing that wisdom. And it's a real shame, where we used to rely on these people, because their wisdom, what they're expressing, is simply a product of what they've consumed from, I would say, legacy institutions that basically feeds 99 or at least percent or the lion's share of our intellectual culture. And by that, I mean like academia, big government, big tech, social media. This is where the majority, mainstream media, all these legacy institutions, this is our culture. Like, try and get away from it. You know, you wake up and you're just swimming in this culture of information created by sponsored institutions.
I'm a perpetual optimist. I'm also a bit of a realist, which I think you probably are too. And I see that the sort of generation of where we are, that sector, they're the ones who have the potential to create the change. I really do.
Agreed.
I think above is like you've just spoken about. Below is just fully indoctrinated because they grew up with tech.
Yeah.
And there's a natural attrition. There's going to be a natural attrition. So this generation is going to move into it. So if and when our generation, takes on this critical thinking and really starts to use logic and see the world around them, I'm excited, and I'm going to ask you, what is the potential? Now let's start with chiropractic before we go into the world. But what is the potential if chiropractors all started to use more, like really focused in on philosophy and logic? What is the potential for the profession?
Oh man, quite simple. When there is a significant increase in the use of critical thinking, then what you'll see is the division between the two extremes, like, will become a bit more unified. In that, so this is what I see. Increased use in critical thinking means two things: increased innovation and a decrease in conflict. Right? If everyone, if your priority was, I want to know the truth, I want to understand this knowledge, right? If that became the highest priority for everyone, instead of, I want to be right, or I'm looking for applause, I want my opponent to be wrong, I want to defeat them, and it becomes debate instead of discussion. That's what we live in now. It's just in this profession and in the world. But a debate by its very nature has to have a winner and loser. It's a competition, right? So then if it's all about winning and losing, look at the tactics that people will use and the rhetorical strategies. But if it becomes about a discussion, because it's not, the priority is not winning and losing, the priority is to know and to understand, to constantly cultivate and nurture the quality of my mind. When that becomes the priority, when we understand that an improvement in all the processors, that's the real value, just like in the computers, increasing the value of the processor is not just awesome for the individual, but for the community that they're in, right? It used to be all these big mainstream, or what do you call those? These big processing units back in the old day, and they'd link a bunch of them together. Just because they're coupling the processing power. That's what would happen for humanity if we individually increase our processing power, then collectively the processing power goes up. And then that's what you see: less conflict and more innovation. It wouldn't just be a benefit to this profession, but it would be a benefit to all of humanity. And you're always going to run into that. I ran into it today, actually. There'll never be total unity. It's a dream. Forget it. This is the fallacy, again, of futility. Just because there can't be 100% unity is not a reason to give up on working together with others. Mm. Like, you and Sarah are unified, a unified front. With your guys' unity, you do more together, don't you? Mm-hmm. What's the problem with unity? Mm. It's the assumption that people think, well, it's 100% unity across the board. Of course, that's never going to happen. But it doesn't mean I'm not striving for it with my community, my circle, my colleagues. This constant fallacy of futility. Well, I can't know everything, so why know anything at all? You can't know the truth about anything, so why ever study? There'll never be complete 100% unity, so why work for unity? This is ridiculous. There'd never be a relationship. How would you and Sarah be married? There can never be 100% unity, right? And that kind of pessimism, like I know a lot of things I talk about seem like pessimistic, but to me, that's pessimism. I like realism, and I'm also like you, an optimist and kind of idealistic too. I see a lot of positive things coming out of this super auspicious time in our world, a lot of positive things. And that's just what happens in physics, right? Equal and opposite reaction. Yeah, there are a lot of negative things going on, but I also see the incredible positive things that occur as a reaction to it.
Completely agree. I like to think of it as a slingshot. You know, if you picked up a slingshot and you wanted to shoot it, the further you
Yeah.
wanted to go, the further you got to pull back, you know?
Yeah.
Travis, you know, your mind is extraordinary. And, you know, as soon as I can get a flight to Holland, I'm going to come and sit down and have a coffee or a beer and talk more. But is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with? Anything in particular that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, stay positive, like Tom and me. And most importantly, if you really want to change in the way you think, and you really want to start thinking for yourself, then first be honest with yourself. That's try and understand the quality of the mind, why it's so important. If it's not attractive to you, you'll never pursue it. If you don't understand the benefits, you'll never pursue it. It's just daydreaming. It's just a wish, right? So if someone is really sincere and they want to make a change, think for themselves, think critically, first, just be honest with yourself and try and develop an understanding of why it's so valuable. The quality of your thinking and your mind will determine the quality of your life. It can't get any simpler. And when you understand that, when you know that is absolutely true, then it's easier to pursue this and to get results and to keep pushing and working, strive to learn, strive to understand. Two different things. Yeah, of course I want knowledge, but I also want to understand that knowledge. Knowledge without understanding is often worthless, and at best, and at worst, it can be like a political weapon. So just understand it, be patient, know that it takes work. And together, we're all going to do a great thing, like you are all the time. I always appreciate your enthusiasm, your optimism. Love following you on Instagram. Facebook gets a little harder. I'm often suspended, but I do get to follow you on Instagram. I love watching it. And surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
Keep them in your circle. I look forward to you coming to the Netherlands. But yeah, and anyone can reach out to me, which is easy.
How can they get hold of you if they need to reach out to you, Travis?
I would say, luckily, I've never been banned from Facebook Messenger, but it could happen. But you can always reach me on there, and I respond pretty quick. Travis Corcoran on Facebook. But the easiest is always email. tcthedc@gmail. tcthedc@gmail, or travis@topchiro.no.
Perfect. And we'll put some links to that in the show notes. Travis, thank you ever so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you giving of your time and your wisdom.
My pleasure, Tom.
Thank you.